It's scary to die at 20 years old, and even more so from the guillotine when the whole world is against you, but the universe had its own plans. To the horror of the main character, after 3 years of imprisonment in a dungeon, the day of execution arrived. The only heir of Emperor Franklin, Princess Sophia was a very selfish person. In her youth, she did not understand the problems of the state and did not want to understand those around her, for which she was sentenced to execution by decision of the Revolutionary Council. The most cruel death awaited the girl. Her head was to be cut off. The crowd of spectators demanded blood. Among the fierce opponents of the heroine were fellow students at the academy, Prince Marcel from a neighboring state and his friend Emily from an ancient noble family. The day was sunny. These were the last seconds of the princess's short life. The tip of the guillotine fell on the fragile neck, blood sprayed in all directions, and Sophia's personal diary fell out of her hands. The princess screamed loudly in horror. The main character sat on the bed in her apartment, not understanding what had happened. Little hands trembled with fear. The girl grabbed her neck with a shudder. Sophia looked at her arms and legs. They seemed completely childish. Then she went to the mirror, in which she saw a girl of about 10 years old. The main character could not understand what had happened. The last memory was of the armored guards seizing the struggling princess and leading her to the place of execution. Sophia clearly remembered the prison bars and solitary confinement in which she spent 3 whole years. The most terrible thing was the clang of the guillotine. The girl sat on the bed in a cold sweat, hoping that it was just a nightmare. Suddenly my hand hit something hard under the pillow. There was a book lying on the bed nearby. The princess carefully took the volume in her hands. It was a thick old handwritten notebook covered in dirt and red stains. The main character opened the first page and recognized her personal diary, but it looked very old and shabby. Sophia read page after page with trepidation. A scream of horror echoed through the palace corridors. The princess reached the last entry. It was the day of execution. The main character went down to the dining room. She was shaking all over. Sophia was greeted by the head chef. The princess remembered that, according to diary entries, she fired him in the future for tasteless food. There were vegetables on the dish, which the girl did not like, and her appetite disappeared completely. In order not to give the appearance that something had happened, the princess took a spoon. Surprisingly, she found the dish very pleasant. Sophia was surprised. She used to hate these products. The main character turned to the cook, who was watching his mistress with fear. The girl praised the cook for the quality. The taste was great. Each vegetable was cooked so that it simply melted in the mouth. The chief cook was shocked by the hostess's words. They had never heard kind words from her before. The princess finished the last bites with great appetite. The dungeon and the stale, mouldy bread that the guards threw at her again appeared in her head. Sophia again turned to the chef, who was shaking with fear and was ready for reproaches and insults, as was always the case. The lady was very pleased and thanked us for the excellent breakfast. The maids present could not believe what was happening. The cook was glowing with happiness. This was the first gratitude in his life, the workers whispered, discussing the first kind words of their selfish mistress. The chief culinary specialist said that he is always ready to take care of the health of the imperial family. A terrible dream surfaced again, where after the revolution everyone turned away from the young princess. The evil voice of a bespectacled stranger in her head reproached the girl that she did not know the value of life, and that one royal dinner was worth a month's wages of a worker. Sitting alone in a flowering garden, Sophia tried to reassure herself that everything written in the diary was just a dream. The main character loved sweets very much, especially when she was nervous, so she decided to eat a piece of cake as a sedative. The maids listened to the mistress's instructions. One of them ran to the kitchen. In anticipation of sweets, the girl sat down at the table. The maid named Grace was already carrying a huge fairy cake with pieces of fruit and buttercream. Suddenly the maid stumbled and fell to the ground, unable to hold the tray. The beautiful cake fell cream side down, and Grace herself landed on top of it. In the past, Sophia would have severely punished her maids for a mistake. She was a very tyrannical mistress. To the surprise of those around her, the princess did not scream or pull the girls by the hair. She asked if her worker had hurt herself. The maids were shocked by the change in their mistress's behavior. Grace tearfully asked to be forgiven for ruining the cake. This look seemed very familiar and close to Sophia. The princess remembered that when she was in prison, only this girl came to visit her and helped while away the difficult days of loneliness. The maid did not abandon her until the very day of her execution, constantly taking care of her. Grace talked with the main character, combed her hair, and secretly brought something tasty. The girls sat together in the cell for hours and talked. Even on the last day of her life, the maid came to visit her mistress. Sophia had nothing to thank the devoted maid. She simply said thank you to her for everything. In front of the scaffold, the girls hugged each other like family. Sophia remembered the warmth that the simple girl shared with her evil young mistress, who constantly humiliated and punished the servants. The frightened eyes of that same Grace were now very close. The princess smiled and reassured the maid. The main character decided that it was time to pay the girl back for all the past years of kindness and care. Sophia invited the maid to become her personal maid. The lady was happy that she could now thank the poor girl. Grace was shocked by the offer. She did not at all consider herself worthy of such a title. Now the main character finally realized that the entries in the diary were genuine, and it was not a nightmare at all. It was time to study in more detail all of my manuscripts from the past. Sophia spent days reading page after page. The princess understood that she had to prevent famine and a revolutionary uprising of her people. The girl was determined to change history. The main task of all was to avoid the guillotine execution itself. The heroine began studying economics, history, and other sciences. Reading every page of the diary, the princess no longer doubted that these were her own notes. The girl shuddered every time when she reached the last words. Sophia could not understand how she managed to return to childhood and was ready to correct all her mistakes. From the diary, the princess learned that soon the financial situation of her empire would worsen. All this would lead to famine, then a fierce infection, and the death of a large number of people would follow. Then the people would rise up, a revolution would take place, and even neighboring countries would help the commoners. After reading hundreds of volumes, Sophia realized that she could not cope with all the issues of the empire on her own. She needed someone capable of understanding everything and helping. The princess remembered that besides Grace, one more person remained faithful to her until the very end. It was a member of the Imperial Council who, in his young years, with knowledge and intelligence, received a high status and fought with the aristocrats for the financial well-being of the state. In the diary, the young man was described as a four-eyed enemy and a bastard who constantly scolded the princess for waste and poor judgment. The manuscript did not mention the name and place of residence of the treacherous and rude young man from the point of view of the former Sophia. The only place where it was possible to find out something was the palace itself and the residence of Emperor Franklin, where the girl and her maid went. Grace was surprised that her mistress suddenly wanted to meet with an unknown man. Sophia said that she really wanted to meet the young man and asked to accompany her. Without hesitation, the maid assumed that this was the princess's lover. The maid was delighted and promised to help the mistress in everything. The girls approached the emperor's apartment when they heard menacing screams. A young voice argued that the empire would soon go bankrupt and urgent measures must be taken to avoid this. Sophia realized that she had found the young man who was not afraid to contradict even the head of state in order to protect the country. The young council member's name was William. He was from a family of poor nobles, and since childhood he loved to read and study finance and economics, so he understood many issues of the empire. The main character remembered how rudely he allowed himself to communicate with her in the past, not understanding how the princess could not or did not want to understand issues of national importance. Sophia was glad that she found the young man quickly enough. The menacing voice of the four-eyed man was still in her ears when he reproached her for wastefulness, accusing her of expensive imperial dinners. Since then, the previous princess hated William and did not communicate with him. A young member of the Imperial Council reproached the girl that she was not interested in the problems of the country, which needed to be urgently solved since she was the heir to the throne and not its decoration. Only in prison did Sophia learn from Grace that William was the only one who came to the princess's defense and demanded her release. The main character remembered the brave act of the young man and therefore was now trying to find him. The girl stood outside the door and watched as the Empress scolded the young financier for interfering and threatened to transfer him from the capital to the outskirts of the state. In order not to lose her future assistant, the princess decided to urgently intervene in the conversation of the head of the family. The main character asked her father not to be angry with the young employee and to leave the valuable employee in the palace. William silently listened to the conversation between the gentleman and his daughter. Having received approval, Sophia grabbed the young man's hand and hurried to leave the emperor's residence. Despite the fact that the young man referred to being busy, the princess asked to listen to her. The financier had no choice but to agree with the demand of the mistress, who was selfish in his opinion. Questions about the financial situation of the empire surprised the young man. The young man spoke sharply about the expenses of the imperial family. Exactly the same conversation had already happened in the past, after which the former princess made entries in her diary about the rude four-eyed man. But the current heir to the throne surprised William with her knowledge. The main character recalled every past reproach of the financier. A young member of the council repeatedly accused the girl of not being involved in the tasks of the state at all, and of being just an ornament to the palace, not understanding the difficult situation her country was in. In anger, Sophia wrote down on the pages of her diary all her thoughts about William's rudeness and impudence, without even mentioning his name and address. For her then, he was just another employee. In order not to repeat past mistakes, the princess told everything she knew from the records about the impending financial collapse of the empire. To the girl's surprise, the young man knelt before her and recognized her as wise, admiring her knowledge. The main character asked William to help understand the situation and suggest a way out of the crisis. The young man was shocked. This was not how he knew the young mistress at all. Grace, who watched the conversation of the young people with curiosity from afar, was sure that this couple in love was sorting things out. Snatches of words about loyalty and service to the princess of the young man standing on his knee confirmed the thoughts of the maid. Returning to her mansion, Sophia recalled with pleasure the conversation with the young specialist. She felt happy. The words about her wisdom were especially memorable. This is what the princess hastened to share with her diary. Grace was already making plans and was ready to support her mistress in everything, completely unaware of the true essence of the conversation. Taking up the manuscript, the girl wondered whether her new notes could change events. It was necessary to try, and the main character took up the pen. The princess's surprise knew no bounds. Some of the old records disappeared, and new ones appeared. Sophia realized that the positive aspect of William's timely use of knowledge played a role in the history of the state. With a sinking heart, the girl opened the last page, but nothing changed there. The guillotine was put into action. The main character studied new problems that emerged after the changes were made. Now it was necessary to fight infectious diseases in the capital's slums, the uprising of tribes on the borders of the state, and international conflicts. The princess understood that she could not give up and needed to continue to act, since there was still enough time. It was necessary to solve problems. Sophia was ready to act. The girl needed William again to discuss her next life challenge. The capital of the state was a very large center in which the bulk of the country's citizens lived. On the outskirts of the city, there are slums where the poor lived. From the diary, it was known that it was in those places that famine and infectious diseases would begin, which would claim many human lives. It was necessary to try to change the situation. The manuscript indicated that dissatisfied poor people would rebel and demand the execution of the princess. thoughts of the guillotine made the main character shudder again, which frightened her maid. Sophia did not know what to do and decided to deal with the problem on the spot. The girl again turned to a competent specialist for help. Sophia warned the maid that they were going for a walk. Grace was glad that she would meet William again. The maid demanded that her mistress change into a beautiful outfit, puzzling the mistress, who did not understand why she needed to change. The maid insisted on her demand, and the girls went to the dressing room. The dress looked gorgeous. Sophia was simply beautiful. Grace took out an expensive hairpin that the neighboring emperor had given the princess a few years ago. It was the favorite decoration of the heir to the throne. The preparations were over, and the girls hurried to meet William, who had arrived. The main character greeted the guest. The young man looked at his mistress with admiration. The young man was amazed by the beauty of the princess and compared her to the magical spirit of the forest and flowers. Grace watched the young man and was happy, but Sophia could not understand what was happening to her guest. The princess asked her new assistant to look into certain issues. William was surprised by the girl's request. Having learned that we were talking about slums, the young man was even more confused. With one voice, the maid and the financier refused to listen to the main character, who suggested visiting the dangerous outskirts of the city. But the princess did not think of retreating. Accompanied by palace guards, Sophia went for a walk. The guards tried to keep up with the princess, who boldly went to unfamiliar places. William was especially worried about Sophia. He did not have time to warn the emperor about his daughter's decision. The princess reassured her fellow travelers and confidently continued moving. The appearance of the city changed. A terrible stench was everywhere. But the main character was not afraid of the stench. She recalled the terrible imprisonment, in which it was much worse. The main smell was due to the fact that there was no opportunity to wash. Suddenly, the girl saw a boy lying not far from the garbage heaps and hurried to him to find out how he was feeling. Grace and William agreed that water was necessary to keep things clean. The child was simply lying on the road. He did not have the strength to get up. The financier suggested that the baby was not sick, he was just hungry. The mistress asked the maid to get the food and sweets that they had prepared for the walk. Sophia had never heard of hunger before. The princess was surprised to learn about terrible things. She thought how she could help those in need. William was surprised by the lady's interest and her desire to fight the problems of poor people. Grace reminded the hostess that they had recently passed by a church where the boy could be taken. The guard took the exhausted child in his arms and carried him to the temple. It was a small cathedral consisting of several rooms. The church servant happily agreed to shelter the poor man and take care of him. William looked at the buildings and courtyard. It could easily accommodate a large number of people to provide them with food and medicine if an epidemic broke out in the city. The abbot was glad to meet the princess and thanked her for caring for her subjects. Sophia was glad that she visited the slums and was able to see the local problems. The young man summed up the walk. It was necessary to organize the distribution of food and water on the outskirts, as well as access to medical care. The main thing was to install a water supply system, but there were no funds in the treasury of the empire, so the main character, without hesitation, gave away her valuable hairpin to cover part of the costs. Grace was shocked by the mistress's act. This item was the princess's favorite accessory and was very expensive. The main character was not at all upset because this was necessary to solve financial problems. The fellow travelers looked at their mistress as if she were a saint. The cost of the jewelry would be enough to cover most of the cost of building the water pipeline. William vowed to make good use of the money received from the sale of the treasure. The poor people were amazed by the princess's act, and now Sophia had allies. At the Imperial Council, the young specialist had difficulty convincing the aristocrats to approve funding for the noble idea of the heiress to the throne. 2 weeks after the walk, changes began in the slums, which made the local residents very happy. It was the turn to solve the next problems, and the princess remembered how every day she waited for the maid in prison. The maid helped her wash, talked about life in the capital, and read the books she had brought with her. Most of all, Sophia liked the good fairy tale about the prince and the dragon. She was looking forward to the continuation, until one day she found out that there would be no ending, realizing that something irreparable had happened to the author. The girl thought that right now she had the opportunity to correct the situation. Visiting noble gentlemen was one of the princess's regular events. One day, the daughter of an eminent merchant gathered her peers for a sweet party. Everyone admired Sophia's act, who decided to help the common people, but did not understand why she parted with the priceless jewelry. The words about the call of the heart were received with surprise. Noble girls admired the princess's generosity. The main character quickly got tired of the sweet speeches. She dreamed of going home as soon as possible. After getting into the carriage, the girls discovered a pleasant, tasty gift in the form of cakes, beautifully packed in a box. Deciding to be a benefactor to the end, Sophia handed over the treat to the maid. The main character suddenly decided on the way to visit Grace's house and meet her parents and sisters. The maid did not expect such a proposal at all. A small wooden house was nearby. The maid's mum and dad were shocked by the unplanned visit from the princess. Sophia decided that there would be enough cakes for all family members and she would have a couple more left over. Grace introduced her mistress to her 3 sisters and brother, all of whom were delighted with the treats. The maid mentioned Roxy, the youngest in the family, who was very weak and sickly, so she could not leave the room. The fragile girl was lying on the bed. There were many books nearby. She was very happy about Sophia. The little girl rarely went outside, but she found her favorite pastime and wrote books, inviting the distinguished guest to read a still unfinished fairy tale. This was the one that the main character was so impatiently waiting for in the dungeon. The princess understood why the story had no end. The heir to the throne invited Roxy to sponsor her work. The girl was surprised. She did not want to be helped out of pity. The main character convinced her younger sister Grace that her fairy tales were great. Sophia asked to be sure to finish the story of the prince and the dragon. Roxy wrote many books. One of them was dedicated to meeting a wonderful princess. Time flew quickly. Winter came. One evening, the main character found out that she was enrolled in the academy. Sophia invited Grace to go with her, since she is a personal servant and can accompany her mistress. The maid couldn't believe her luck. The educational institution was located in a picturesque place in a neighboring state, where members of royal families, as well as high-ranking and eminent nobles and nobility, took classes there for 6 years. Grace was traveling for the first time and enthusiastically looked at the beautiful scenery passing outside the carriage window. Sophia was upset because it was the 2 people who were trained with her who were the main enemies who sent her to the guillotine. One of the opponents was a prince from a large neighboring empire, the handsome Marcel, an intelligent young man and an excellent fighter. His like-minded person was the aristocrat Emily, from a high noble family, with whom Sophia did not have a good relationship from the very first days at the academy. The main character remembered how she dreamed of conquering Marcel with one glance. The young man stubbornly ignored the princess. The prince communicated with an ordinary noblewoman, whom Sophia considered lower class. In the past, the princess constantly humiliated Emily and her maid Kate, so it was understandable why they were opposed to her. Just like the first time Sophia arrived in the city, the upper-class girls contemptuously communicated with the noblewoman. The princess was left with no options, and she, not believing her own words, began to defend her future enemy. Grace looked at her mistress with admiration, proud of her action. The noble Prince Marcel, who was passing nearby along with his servant Henry, also heard the insulting speeches and went to help the victim. At this time, Sophia indignantly reprimanded Emily's offenders. The princess unexpectedly extended her hand to the girl. Tears rolled down from the noblewoman's eyes. The main character was frightened by her impulse. Handing an embroidered scarf to her future rival to wipe her face, she ran away, leaving the amazed girl. Marcel, who observed the actions of the princess from the sidelines, was pleasantly surprised by the nobility and simplicity of the unfamiliar person. The prince definitely wanted to meet this girl. Finally, Sophia and the maid got to their apartment. The maid was here on equal terms with the mistress. She had everything for living, including a large bed. The princess asked the assistant not to be shy. The girls talked enthusiastically. Sophia needed advice in love affairs. She told the maid about her past unsuccessful attempts to marry Marcel. Dreams of an ideal couple collapsed immediately. The young man did not pay attention to her at all. The princess was very intrusive and did not give rest to her chosen one. Grace considered herself experienced in winning men's hearts. She was a little older than her mistress. She had read many books and immediately rejected Sophia's past methods. The conspirators came up with a strategic plan and went to the bathhouse. It was a large public establishment. Grace had never been to such places. The girls splashed in the warm water. The maid tried to wash away all the dirt after the long journey. Sophia also helped the assistant, once again surprising her with her simplicity and care. The princess warmly remembered every act of Grace when she was in captivity and tried to repay her in kind. Another princess entered the bathhouse. She greeted the girls and invited them to feel free to join her in the pool. This was Olivia, the daughter of the local emperor, who was very popular at the academy and quickly achieved the status of a saint, attending temple services with her father and always helping those in need. The girls had a great conversation, regardless of ranks and titles, and it was time to go home. Olivia was glad to meet you and reminded the new guests about the welcome party that would take place the next day. Sophia remembered again that evening when she dreamed of dancing with Marcel. The prince communicated only with his girlfriend, not noticing the others. The couple was magnificent. They were the main enemies of the princess. Memories of the guillotine again made the girl tremble in horror. The maid was ready to help her beloved mistress in everything, and they began to execute the plan to capture the admirer. The girls chose a place for a supposedly random meeting in an alley near a fountain. The choice fell on Greg, the youngest prince of a neighboring kingdom with a large amount of military force, capable of protecting Sophia in the future. Grace told me how to behave in order to attract the attention of a young man. Walking through the park, the princess, as if by chance, drops a handkerchief, and the young man must pick it up and hand it to the hostess. A conversation will begin, and an invitation to a dance party will follow. But everything didn't go according to plan. Greg didn't notice anything and walked past the main character. But Marcel picked up the handkerchief and began to look for the person who dropped it. Emily, passing by, recognized a similar monogram and said who the small object might belong to, since she had previously received the same one from the hands of the princess. The prince quickly found the hostess and, returning the ill-fated scarf, offered to become a partner at the ball tomorrow. The conversation of the young couple was interrupted by a scandal between the two brothers. The elder Stephen pulled Greg by the hand and angrily reprimanded him for his frivolous behavior. The younger heir even received a couple of blows to the face. Suddenly, Sophia headed towards the troublemakers, angrily turning to the elder, who was greatly surprised by the courage of the young stranger, who asked him not to spoil the appearance of her dance partner. Sophia then apologized to Marcel. The choice was made. Greg was shocked by the beauty's behavior. He thanked her and tried to refuse the offer, citing timidity and little experience. But the main character was determined and said goodbye until the next evening. The younger prince was much weaker than his brother, despite constant training in martial techniques that were held in high esteem in his kingdom. Sophia charmed the young man with her spontaneity and confidence. The day of the dance ball came. Grace did her best, and her mistress looked like the most beautiful girl on the planet. Especially the little hat with bright flowers was wonderful. There were 2 hours left before the evening began, and the princess decided to take a walk around the square. The beauty walked past a rider from a riding club leading a horse. The main character came closer to pet the animal, which in turn drew attention to the luxurious greenery on the girl's head. In an instant, all the beauty disappeared in the horse's mouth. The entire outfit was completely ruined. The rider, who did not have time to react to the behavior of his charge, apologized. Returning home, the girl began to wash herself again, blaming herself for her stupidity. Grace had to quickly prepare a new dress. Invited guests gathered in a luxurious dance hall. The gentleman looked at the beauties with curiosity and admiration. Instead of a lush outfit with a corset, Sophia wore a light open-work dress that emphasized the color of her skin and did not interfere with breathing. The girl felt uncomfortable. She was very upset with her modest clothes, not at all noticing the enthusiastic glances of her fans. Greg himself was most captivated by the beauty of the main character. The prince looked upset. He understood that the princess could not belong to him. She deserves more. Seeing her partner's downcast gaze, Sophia became even more sad, thinking that he was disappointed in her appearance. Finally, the prince smiled and dispelled all the girl's doubts, showering her with compliments. The princess's eyes sparkled with happiness. The main character suggested going dancing. Sophia dragged her chosen one to the center of the hall. Greg was weak in ballroom dancing, but tried to lead his partner according to etiquette. The girl understood the young man's condition, encouraged him with smiles and words, trying not to notice his shortcomings. Sophia danced superbly, quietly helping her gentleman. Those present noticed the unusual couple. The evil tongues of envious people discussed the shortcomings and mistakes of the dancers. From the outside, it seemed that the princess did not know how to perform pirouettes and could not keep up with the beat. Marcel appeared in the hall. He also carefully watched the princess, realizing that her partner was to blame. Greg was upset that he did not meet the dancer's professional skills. The young man understood that by his movements, those around him were assessing the couple without seeing the superiority of his partner. In fact, Sophia easily performed her part and quietly and gently led her chosen one. The first dance ended. The three girls began to discuss the dancers. The partner took the main character by the hand and persistently pulled her along. Marcel stood nearby, having a friendly conversation with another guest of the ball. Greg asked the prince to replace him for the next dance. Sophia was shocked. She tried in every possible way to avoid past mistakes, but her partner pleaded ill and went to get some cold drinks. The handsome prince was pleased with the circumstances and invited the girl to the next dance. The main character smiled mysteriously and went to the site. Greg, who was watching what was happening, was upset. He saw the same smile that was easily transferred to another. Sophia did not doubt her abilities and hoped that her new partner would be weaker and make a mistake. Those watching were surprised by the princess's quick transformation, considering it a merit of His Highness. Greg took 2 glasses of cold water. He blamed himself for his weakness. The beautifully dancing couple in the center of the hall irritated him. Marcel turned out to be an excellent partner and made no mistakes. Sophia seemed to float in the air and felt happy. The dance ended quickly. The gentleman offered to continue dancing, but the girl refused and went to her chosen one. The princess thanked the young man for his concern. A glass of cool drink was just in time. Greg praised his partner for her beautiful dance. Sophia did not seem to notice the bitterness in the prince's words and praised him in every possible way for his attention. The main character was ready to support her chosen one in everything. The princess tried to cheer up the young man and instill confidence in him, promising to give him several dancing lessons. Greg was amazed by the beauty's kindness. The couple happily continued the dance evening, not paying attention to those around them. Earlier, while getting ready for the ball, Sophia invited her maid to spend a free evening at her own discretion, walking around the city and visiting shops. The princess did not forget to give Grace money for various expenses. The maid was shocked by the unexpected offer, deciding to spend everything on the needs of her mistress. The girl ordered the necessary goods and products and walked along the streets, looking at shop windows. The maid's attention was attracted by a chic, elegant dress. The remaining money should have been enough, but it was too big for her mistress, and the maid went on a walk. Grace walked freely around the city for the first time, without rushing anywhere. There were a couple of hours left before the end of the party, and the maid decided to go home. Suddenly, the girl ran into another maid, who was very agitated and asking for help. Recognizing the young blonde as Mrs. Emily's maid, the new friends met, and Kate told a terrible story. During the day, Emily was captured by 4 unknown men and locked in a high tower. The maid was from a forest tribe and had athletic abilities, but she could not reach her mistress. An attempt to climb the stone tower failed. Kate rushed for help and ran into Grace. Remembering the fair and virtuous mistress, who before her eyes tried to help and protect everyone, the maid was ready to continue her good deeds. The maids headed towards the tower. Having climbed the spiral staircase almost to the very top, the girls saw men guarding the only door. There were only 2 guards. It was necessary to come up with a plan of action. Kate and Grace went down and began to watch. Henry, Marcel's servant, caught them doing this. The frightened maids told the young man what happened to Emily. There were only 4 strangers who attacked the girls and kidnapped the lady. The girls didn't know what to do to save the lady. Henry was full of determination. He was a worthy assistant to his master and could not ignore trouble. The maids looked at him with delight. The young man practiced martial arts with his owner, and the training was not in vain. Both guards were defeated and were unconscious. The door turned out to be unlocked, and the young people entered a spacious room. A frightened Emily sat on the floor in the center and clutched her dance dress, which was brutally ruined, to her chest. The lady said that when she returned home, she saw that everything in the room was turned upside down. The girl discovered the loss and a note indicating the place where her outfit was located. The meeting place was indicated as the North Tower of the Academy. Grace didn't understand who needed this. Henry showed a handkerchief he took from the pocket of one of the guards. It had the insignia of Princess Sophia's empire on it. The maid could not believe what had happened, knowing her mistress. Emily said that the kidnappers ordered her to stay away from the ball and not disgrace high society with her presence. The dance outfit was hopelessly ruined. Grace had no time to think. The maid thought with horror what she would do if her mistress were in the place of the victim. Kind Grace gave all the money to Kate to buy the very dress that she had recently admired in the store. The remaining coins were enough for a new outfit. While the athlete Kate was running for a dress, Grace took care of the body and hairstyle of her new friend. In the past, Emily managed to show up at the party shortly before it ended. The girl gave Marcel a note from his servant, which described the events and the suspicion of Sophia's involvement in the kidnapping. The aristocrat danced with the prince for the rest of the ball. Earlier that evening, the future powerful trio, including Princess Olivia, teamed up against Sophia for the first time. The suspicions of the 3 friends grew every day, strengthened by the princess's inaction and paving the way for her to the guillotine. For now, these were just Henry's guesses. Emily and the maids did not believe that the princess was involved. The aristocrat in a new outfit hurried to the ball. The girl arrived on time. The party was in full swing. Emily apologized to Marcel for being late. The lady gave the gentleman a note from his servant. Dancing Sophia saw an aristocrat in the crowd and by her appearance realized that something had happened. Emily's eyes were full of bitterness. Prince Marcel invited his chosen one to dance. It so happened that, thanks to Grace, this fateful evening ended somewhat differently than before. Morning came, arrested Sophia gently stretched in bed. It was time to go to the academic canteen. The maid left the lady at the table and went to get breakfast. The princess was surprised to notice a young man next to the maid. The main character decided to watch the couple. Suddenly, Sophia recognized the man. It was the servant of her old enemy. The princess again remembered Marcel's role in her execution. The blonde girl ran into the dining room and rushed straight to Henry and Grace standing at the counter. The trio were enthusiastically discussing some events. The maid returned with a full tray, but Sophia had lost her appetite. The maid told the mistress about the terrible story that happened to Emily and Henry's feet. The princess began to remember. She realized what her past mistake was. Then she did not look into it and simply ignored this incident. Sophia reread her notes again. That princess did not look for the culprits and did not protect Emily, who was a subject of her empire. Because of this, all the attempts of the main character to make friends with Olivia were in vain. She always supported all people, including those from the lower strata. Now Sophia was different, and she was determined to understand the current situation. The princess remembered how inhumanely the guards treated her. The organizers of the kidnapping turned out to be 4 children of the highest noble titles, for whom Emily was a lower class. Their servants stole the dress and then locked the girl in the tower. After talking with everyone, the main character wanted to send them out of the academy, then reconsidered her decision and agreed to intercede on their behalf with Olivia, who was unanimously chosen as the chairman of the academy. Sophia agreed to meet with the daughter of the local emperor. At the dinner table, the princess spoke about the conversation with the culprits and expressed her sincere regret about what happened. Olivia was delighted with the actions of the guest and offered friendship. This was another small victory for the main character. The girls talked for a long time, discussing various issues and problems of the academy and their subjects. Sophia could not believe that she had managed to enlist the support of Saint Olivia herself. Returning home, the princess did not know how to thank her maid for saving her reputation. Grace couldn't understand what was happening to her mistress. The mistress insisted on rewarding the maid. The girls decided to go into the city for a walk. Thus ended another important turning point in the princess's fate. Classes at the academy continued. They were interesting but difficult. Mathematics was especially difficult for the main character. In order to better assimilate the material, the princess decided to attend classes with a maid, so that later it would be easier to understand complex tasks. Grace was surprised and promised to try her best. The maid could not get enough of her luck. Now she will know a lot of new things. In addition to classes, it was necessary to choose an additional club. The boys usually studied military techniques, and the ladies the processes of tea drinking and social manners. Sophia has long decided what she wants to do in her free time. The princess went to the riding club. The girl was surprised to see a familiar face. At the stables, the main character met the club leader, sophomore Martin. It was he who led the horse in that very park when Sophia was walking along the alley and was left without a stylish hat with flowers. The young man once again apologized for the scandalous situation and offered to attend classes. The state where Martin, the son of the main leader of the clan, lived owned large stud farms. Almost all the men had been in the saddle since childhood and were excellent riders. The main character pursued her goals. She knew that on a horse she could quickly escape from her pursuers, since the carriages were quite slow-moving. The sophomore was surprised by the choice of lady. He liked this beautiful, calm girl. The princess was ready to learn horse riding and asked about the animal's habits. Suddenly, another man intervened in the conversation, entering the stable to pick up a horse. Martin looked back and saw Greg, who had already visited the club several times. The leader suspected that the young lady came to study precisely because of the prince and invited her to ride a horse with a friend. The girl was surprised to meet her dancing partner and happily agreed. The princess thought that riding a horse together was very beautiful and romantic. Only after mounting the horse did the girl realize that it was scary. Sophia sat behind her with her eyes closed in horror and convulsively clung to Greg. The young man tried to calm the girl down and controlled the horse carefully. Finally, the main character dared to open her eyes and saw beautiful scenery around her. Both riders talked and admired the local beauty. The princess laid her head on her chosen one's shoulder with pleasure and closed her eyes dreamily. Greg was confused. He had never been that close to any of the girls. On the way, the young couple met Grace walking near the club. Enthusiastic, Sophia began waving her arms, greeting the maid, completely forgetting about caution. Having lost her balance, the girl fell from her horse to the ground. Everything happened suddenly. Greg didn't even have time to warn the lady to hold on to him tighter. The prince quickly found his bearings, so the main character fell straight into his arms, practically unharmed. The young man was concerned about the princess's condition. It turned out that thanks to Greg, Sophia did not receive a single injury. The main character thanked her savior. Returning to the academy, the princess decided to expand her social circle and meet other classmates in order to enlist their help and support in the future. Sophia's attention has long been attracted by a beautiful girl with glasses and luxurious dark hair. The modest stranger was always alone and always reading some book. It was Chloe, the daughter of a merchant. Her father owned a large company and dreamed that his child would receive a good education. He barely managed to get her a place at the academy. The girl was finishing reading the last book she had brought with her and was upset that she had taken so little literature. The reading lover was very upset and did not know what to do during breaks between classes. Chloe looked at the other girls freely communicating with each other and was not afraid to approach them. Completely upset, the merchant's daughter simply wanted to disappear. She understood that she belonged to the lower class and she had no place in the academy. Seeing her sad classmate, Sophia approached her. The princess became interested in the book and began to question the stranger. The beauty with glasses was very surprised by the appearance of the princess and happily said that she had loved reading since childhood. The main character suggested that we discuss the stories we had read together and share brochures. The girls got to know each other better. The princess was pleasantly surprised to learn that in front of her was the daughter of the head of a large trading company, immediately thinking about future food supplies. Sophia invited her new friend to read her favorite fairy tale about the prince and the dragon. It was the first time Chloe had seen such a book. The beauty did not believe that Sophia sincerely wanted to communicate with her, and not just out of pity for her loneliness. But the main character insisted that now they would tell each other interesting works and discuss various topics from the literature they had read. The princess always remembered how lonely she was in prison for 3 whole years. There, Grace was her only source of joy and companionship. Sophia looked forward to her appearance every morning. There was an annual tradition at the academy. One of the embassies organized a sweet table for representatives of the nobility from a large neighboring empire. The princess was planning to attend the delicious event for the first time. The day of the reception arrived, and the main character was going to get to know her neighbors better. For the 3rd year, Princess Meg from a small agricultural province invited guests. The hostess of the sweet table especially remembered last year, when several heirs of representatives of the highest circles of the neighboring empire came. The guests behaved incorrectly and were unhappy with everything. The young men ruined all the treats that had been prepared with great difficulty in their honor and left. Meg was looking forward to today's meeting with horror. That year, the princess was very upset and cried the whole evening from humiliation. The representative of the agricultural province was surprised by the arrival of the heiress to the throne of the empire and offered to enjoy exotic fruits. Sophia hardly remembered that in a past life she had already met the princess and quarreled with her, demanding to sell food during a period of famine. There were already guests in the reception hall looking at the sweets with dissatisfied faces. The main character enthusiastically pounced on numerous fruits and other treats. Sophia wanted to try literally everything. Meg did not have time to warn her dear guest that this year she decided to take revenge for past humiliations. The buns and cakes dissolved in the princess's mouth instantly. Meg hardly stopped the main character. The agricultural princess had to admit that all the sweet foods were prepared 2 years ago. Sophia was shocked. The girl expected a scandal, but it was quiet. The main character did not start screaming. She was surprised by the quality of the food that had been stored for such a long time. Sophia offered cooperation to the owner of the house. Meg was glad that there was a representative who appreciated the technology of her province. The princess thought that pre-prepared food could save lives during famine. Information about the technology of cooking and storing food was sent to the financial brain of the empire. William appreciated the merits of the methods and spoke at the council in favor of supporting agriculture and food procurement. The aristocrats were forced to agree with the young specialist's arguments. Life at the academy continued. In a few days, there was a tournament among young men in martial arts. The custom of the competition was to prepare a special dish for your gentleman. It could be any sandwich, meat product, or sweets at the girl's discretion. Sophia wondered what she could do to please Greg. In a past life, she prepared a surprise for Marcel. The prince categorically refused to accept the gift from Sophia's hands. It was very sad and humiliating. The main character still remembered her feelings. The princess cried all evening, destroying the purchased sweets. Based on bitter experience, the girl decided to ask Greg for permission in advance. Sophia found her chosen one in the stable. The prince was going on a horseback ride again and invited the main character with him. Sitting on her horse, Sophia started talking about the tournament. After a short trip, the couple returned to the city, holding hands tightly. The princess plucked up courage and asked to prepare something special for Greg. The young man said that in his kingdom it is customary for girls to prepare food for their husbands. The prince said that he would be very pleased to receive something made by Sophia. Greg was thoughtful and taciturn, remembering his home. The prince really wanted to win, but he had strong opponents and the chances were slim. Sophia realized that she had to support her friend and prepare something special. All grocery stores and shops refused the application, unable to cope with the need. The main character was in a panic and did not know where else to turn for help. The girl rushed home to the maid. Grace always came up with something in difficult situations. The maid didn't think long and offered to cook the dish ourselves. The maid could only make the dough. All that remained was to figure out what exactly the girls would do. Sophia did not know what she could cook for her chosen one so that he would like it. The girls' opinions differed. They did not know what products to buy. Realizing that Grace's help alone was not enough, the princess went for support. In the library, the main character met Chloe. My friend was ready to help, but she also had no practice. All the recipes were in books. Returning home, the girls met Emily, who also agreed to participate in preparing a delicious dish. Sophia was shocked. One of the main enemies of the past, who pushed her to execution, was nearby and ready to help. Emily also did not have information on preparing the dish, but agreed to do everything together. The girl boasted that she was very good at cutting vegetables and fruits. While the ladies were preparing to surprise the gentleman, the boys were training. Marcel studied military techniques from early childhood and repeatedly participated in tournaments. Henry looked at the gentleman with pleasure. The prince had more than one victory to his name. Despite his young age, he masterfully wielded a sword and spear. The servant admired the polished actions of his master, thinking that he was really good, and if he wanted, he would have no end to girls, even from a princess of the same large empire. The young man remembered how he and Marcel used to sneak into the kitchen and cook the dishes themselves. Returning to his apartment, Henry met Emily hurrying to Sophia. The girl said that she was going to help her friend prepare a dish. The servant was not sure that his master would accept a tasty gift from someone. The young man decided to take control of the situation. In the dining room, the cooking process was in full swing. Sophia was surprised to see the guy enter. The princess, with the help of a maid, managed to prepare a huge bun in the shape of a horse. Henry criticized the size, realizing that a huge piece of dough was simply dangerous for the stomach. Emily boasted to the young man about her abilities. The incredibly large number of finely chopped vegetables did not fit on the trays. Kate ran into the dining room carrying a roasted ham of beef. The girl was from a forest tribe and cooked food well over a fire that she lit in the garden. Chloe kept a book of recipes and supported her friends morally. Henry was horrified by what he saw and decided to take matters into his own hands. The young man suggested that the girls prepare sandwiches. The ladies had never done anything like this and listened carefully to their mentor. Everyone was delighted with the simplicity of the proposal. Sophia got to prepare the bread for the base. Grace actively helped the hostess. The happy princess showed the result. The result was little cute horses in the form of cookies made from dough. There was no time left, and Henry had to agree to the form. Kate busied herself preparing the chicken pieces. The young man was calm. Nothing in the oven should have spoiled this delicious product. Emily received the next task. The girl easily coped with her favorite cutting of vegetables. Henry wondered how not to lose all the elements of the sandwich in such an original form. The idea came with Chloe, who was tasked with making the sauce according to a book recipe. It was time to assemble the culinary creation. Sophia spread the dough and laid out the meat. Emily added some chopped vegetables on top. The stage was completed with a delicious sauce made by the merchant's daughter. The result was impressive. The original sandwiches were ready. Sophia, on behalf of all the ladies, thanked Henry for his help. It was time to get ready for the tournament. The girls sat on the high podium and waited for the competition to start. The princess managed to visit Greg to cheer up the gentleman and wish him success. Their conversation was interrupted by his older brother. The first fight was supposed to take place between relatives. Stephen had no doubt about his victory. He knew the opponent's abilities, having fought him at home several times. Greg was upset. He also understood the complexity of the upcoming fight and the strength of the opponent, who was older and therefore stronger and more experienced than him. Sophia stood up for her chosen one. Despite everything, the main character believed in victory and supported the young man. The princess wished him luck and went to the podium. Stephen was only making fun of his brother. The competition judge announced the start of the match. Greg was focused. The girl's words supported his morale. The princess watched the battle with bated breath. Despite the unequal forces, the younger brother behaved with dignity. Between blows, Stephen managed to pester his opponent with caustic words, hinting at his relationship with a girl. In their country, the female sex was considered second class. Greg steadfastly fought off attacks and restrained his anger. He had lost to his brother many times and knew his techniques, which helped him deliver the decisive blow in a timely manner. Stephen lay in the arena. The prince could not believe his eyes. The judge declared Greg's victory. His older brother was wounded. Sophia rejoiced most of all at the gentleman's success. The young man was impressed by his achievements and grateful to the girl who believed in his strength. A break was announced. The lady and the boy went into the garden. The princess did not stop talking with joy. Greg once again thanked the main character for her support. Suddenly, Marcel approached his friends. The prince congratulated his future opponent on his first victory. It was time to start testing the prepared dish. Greg looked at the shape of the sandwich in surprise. The young man carefully tried the original product. Sophia was looking forward to how the chosen one would appreciate her work. A moment later, a happy smile appeared on the gentleman's face. The complex sandwich was beautiful. Marcel watched Greg happily eat his sandwich. The prince once again congratulated his classmate on his well-deserved victory. Sophia's chosen one thanked her for the kind words. There was an even more interesting battle ahead. The princes were supposed to become opponents. None of them was going to give up. Each was going to win. The time came for the next fight. The young men shook hands and went to prepare for the fight. The spectators took their places on the podium and tensely watched the meeting of rivals on the battlefield. Sophia was confident in her chosen one. The judge announced the names of the participants in the next fight. Each of the princes assessed his competitor. The girls, along with Henry, kept their eyes on the arena. Greg knew that his opponent was more experienced, had repeatedly participated in various competitions, and won. The battle began. The young men crossed swords. The princess's gentleman remembered that a girl was waiting for him on the podium who believed in his victory. The fight continued. Both opponents gave their best. Sophia watched the fight tensely. The princes did not stop fighting for a minute. Marcel was surprised by the onslaught of his opponent. He knew that he was much weaker than him. The young man assessed the situation and analyzed enemy attacks. His Highness understood that his classmate was ready to do anything to win for his girlfriend. This gave him additional strength and confidence. The princess watched her gentleman's every move and rejoiced at his successful attacks. Henry watched in surprise at the girl who ignored his master and believed in the victory of her prince. The battle continued. The forces were almost equal. The young men did not yield to each other and were not going to give up. Greg could not let the main character down. He was determined to win. Marcel also did not want to give in to the enemy. It started to rain. It was not possible to continue the fight, and the referee announced the end of the fight. The young men were upset and agreed to continue the battle at the next tournament, which was to take place in the winter. Sophia was a little upset. She was already ready to celebrate the victory of her chosen one. The princess was in the stands until the very end. Despite the rain, she was impressed by the battle and praised Greg for his courage and strength. The main character did not notice that she was wet. and the day after the tournament, she fell ill. The girl's body temperature rose, she was all on fire. Grace did not leave her mistress for a minute. The next day, the princess's condition improved slightly. The maid insisted that Sophia should not get out of bed and sleep more. Suddenly, the girl heard a familiar voice. Chloe came to visit her sick friend. The reading enthusiast brought the medicine that her father had given her on the trip, and the ladies began to discuss the news. Sophia apologized to the guest for her loneliness and promised to communicate with her more often. The princess could not forget how lonely she used to be despite her status. The friend left, but Sophia was not left alone for long. Greg's appearance shocked the girl. The prince did not pay attention to her embarrassment and told different stories. The guest did not end there. Marcel and Emily joined the young man, worried about the condition of their classmate. The young people had a wonderful time entertaining the patient, who felt much better from the kind words of her friends. The school year was over, the big holidays were ahead, it was time to return home. The path was not short. The main character rode in a carriage and filled out a diary. There were changes in the manuscript, but now the princess had many supporters. Sophia was very interested in her old enemy Marcel. Fortunately, His Highness did not hate the princess and became her ally. In the final part of the records, the princess was still in prison. Her maid was also detained for helping her mistress. Grace was captured and imprisoned. Prince Greg tried to help his beloved by secretly infiltrating the empire. Unfortunately, the young man died in an unequal battle with the guards. The past Sophia found out about the death of the prince and cried, making her daily notes in her diary. The main character felt bad while reading the latest news. The girl understood how much more needed to be done to change history and come to a happy ending. The main problem and cause of the revolution was still hunger. The last change spoke of an uprising of forest tribes on the border of the state. The maid Emily was from one of them. The inhabitants of the forest suffered from the devastation of their lands and the cutting of trees, dying of hunger, while some aristocrats profited from their grief. The diary entries changed depending on the circumstances, but there was no mention of Sophia's father anywhere. The emperor was not interested in the fate of his daughter and took virtually no part in her upbringing. Exhausted by the road and the news, Sophia returned home. In honor of the arrival of the princess, a party of aristocrats was held, but the main character was tired and quickly left the palace. The only person who was sincerely glad to see the princess return was William. The next morning, the financier was already waiting for the lady to discuss the problems of the state. Sophia also managed to miss the young man. A member of the council prepared a report on the work during the princess's absence. William noticed that the girl had changed and looked prettier. Sophia was concentrated and carefully studied the documents. The main character said that in a few years, famine will come to the empire. The princess was thinking about how to prepare for difficult times and what would need to be done to save people. Together with William, the girl discussed the plan of events. It was necessary to prepare food supplies for several years in advance. First of all, it was necessary to stock up on grain that could be grown and processed, because during times of famine, this is the most valuable currency, for which you can even buy a palace. While still at the academy, the princess did not forget about the terrible problem and constantly studied this topic. She found out that it was the violation of trade, and not the lack of products, that was its cause. The state's own food supply and food products were not enough. They did not disappear in neighboring countries, but simply stopped being delivered. Communication with the merchant's daughter gave Sophia ideas. The girl's father was the head of the largest trading company. Since childhood, Chloe has understood the operation of the complex and enlightened her friend on many issues of cargo transportation. The main character was shocked by the new information that could be useful to her in the future. The princess told William about her plans. The girl decided to invite Chloe's father to visit and offer him a deal. The financier liked the lady's thoughts and was surprised by the breadth of her horizons. Mark was not only part of a generation of traders, but also a very astute specialist, highly respected by his colleagues and customers. By sending Chloe to the academy, he made an investment in her future. The dream of the head of the Chamber of Commerce was his daughter's friendship with children from noble families, which contributed to the further development of useful connections. One day, the merchant happily arrived at the palace at the invitation of the heir to the throne. Sophia greeted her dear guest with honor. The main character immediately got down to the topic that interested her and asked if the company could engage in transportation from distant overseas countries. Mark was surprised by the question. He delivered goods all the time. Chloe's father was interested in the product that the princess needed, and he guaranteed the best quality products. Sophia's answer shocked the experienced trader. The head of the chamber did not understand why wheat should be brought from afar, which could not be stored for a long time. The main character confirmed the truth of her words. The princess had one more condition for the delivery of food, the essence of which was that for several years the price of the cargo and its transportation should not change. The merchant did not understand his benefit because during the famine he could earn untold wealth. But the princess insisted on her terms of the deal. Mark did not know what to think, fearing that this was a test from the imperial family. Before leaving for the palace, the daughter assured her father that Sophia was the kindest and most beautiful princess. He could not help but believe his child. The merchant's thoughts were completely confused. He did not understand how this deal was useful to him. The main character was interested in purchasing a fixed quantity of goods at a fixed price over a long period of time. Delivery had to be made regardless of various external factors, including famine. The merchant continued to analyze the princess's offer. Mark knew that prices abroad are always higher than local prices. The contract, which William prepared in advance, included an acceptable price, taking into account the specifics of the transaction. The head of the chamber carefully studied the document. All the nuances of long-term cooperation were reflected on paper. The interests of the merchant were also taken into account when drawing up the agreement, which surprised him. It was a whole food procurement strategy. Mark began to think ahead about a plan for implementing the agreement. Chloe's father was amazed by his partner's business skills, realizing that with his own efforts he could prevent famine in his empire. The deal was signed, the parties were satisfied with each other. Mark mentally thanked his daughter for her wonderful friends. The princess was very pleased with the results of the negotiations. The head of the Chamber of Commerce thanked the heir to the throne for her trust. William was surprised by the lady's ability to convince her interlocutor that she was right. The merchant said goodbye and went home. Sophia said hello to her friend Chloe. William did not understand how the young lady was able to develop an entire tactical plan that could change the situation in the state. The young man admired the princess's strategic mind. Several days passed after the meeting with the merchant. The princess again prepared to visit the slums. The assistant gave preliminary instructions to the guards. Recently, there has been only talk in the capital about Sophia's actions. The main thing was the decision to build a hospital on the outskirts of the city. The hospital has now begun accepting its first patients. The main character appeared from the side of the palace and greeted the guards. The knights were confused. They did not recognize the heir to the throne. The girl was dressed simply in long shorts and a blouse. Despite the lack of outfits, the main character looked great. Even William noted her beauty. This was the most faithful detachment of guards who defended the princess to the last during the uprising. Sophia walked along the streets and did not recognize them. The outskirts had changed a lot lately. The girl and the squad approached the church temple. In the yard, children were playing with a ball. One of the football players recognized the main character. The child ran to catch up with the princess, but the guards detained him. Sophia stopped. She also recognized the boy. His name was Bob. Having calmed the guards, the girl came closer. The main character enthusiastically asked the guy about his life. The boy was grateful to the savior, who more than a year ago did not pass by and took the exhausted child to a church shelter. Bob fussed and reached into his pocket. The boy took out a hair clip that he had made himself and was saving for the meeting. The guy handed his gift to the princess. It was a beautiful thing, made from a rare unicorn horn tree, which was considered very valuable and grew only on the border of the state. Sophia gladly attached the little thing to her hair and thanked the boy. She promised to always wear his gift. The head of the church approached the detachment. The servant invited the distinguished guest to his room. The modest room was clean and quite simple. The priest asked the princess about the academy and talked about local news. The minister knew that Saint Olivia, famous outside her state, also studied at that institution and asked to take her autograph. Sophia agreed to fulfill the request and took the portrait of her friend with her. The main character learned that Olivia's mother lives in the forest areas of the empire. Due to a number of circumstances, she had to send her child to a distant country. The priest said that he is always very worried about the children. The child was very small and did not remember his parents. The princess did not yet understand how she could help, but she promised to do something. The main character was always ready to help those in need. The minister said that the woman had long wanted to meet Sophia and talk, as did the boy, who was preparing and was very happy about their communication. The girl was glad to have a new friendly relationship with the guy. Next in the history of the imperial family and the fate of the princess was a jewelry box made of unicorn wood, or a real box of curses. Not long ago, one of the noble aristocrats, Warren, received his assistant, who reported on the situation on his estate. The count had a large amount of land, which consisted mainly of forests and clearings. It was he who was one of the reasons for the destruction of the empire, and created that very box of Princess Sophia's curses. The count decided to expand his territories. The assistant suggested that the owner use forested areas. On the border of the two states, a large forest grew between the estates of the aristocrats, so there was no clear division of the territory. Warren decided to cut down as many trees as possible on his side, seizing neighboring lands. The problem was that an ancient tribe lived in the forest, which was categorically against the destruction of their home and was ready to resist. The count called in the army to support him, but people and soldiers did not want war. Then Warren came up with a cunning plan. He decided to give Princess Sophia a gift. It was a jewelry box. The box was made from a rare type of wood called unicorn horn, which grows only in the local forest. The emperor loved his daughter, so he would accept the gift with gratitude. Then it would be possible to cut down all the trees and make many boxes. To avoid bloodshed, Warren proposed, with the help of the imperial army, to kidnap the tribe's children and sell them abroad. The count knew that the princess would not part with the wooden hairpin. Warren was sure that the box should have interested the heir to the throne. This was the story of the ill-fated wooden jewelry box. One day, the main character was relaxing, reflecting on entries from her diary. The princess's peace was disturbed by William with the news of the arrival of Earl Warren. The girl did not remember this name and did not understand the reason for the visit. Sophia continued to think about how to change history and what needs to be done in order to defeat hunger and disease, who will protect her if necessary, and hoped that she could avoid the terrible execution. But fate prepared new trials for her.